Hey everyone. So in this video, we are going to talk a little bit about some of the announcements or lack thereof of the what if factors that are coming to Walt Disney World. Possibly. I don't know. What do you guys think? Coming up on Citrus Corner. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Citrus Corner as part of Orange Grove 55. Joining me today are my brothers, my co-workers, so to speak, if you like to call them. You know, we do this as many times as we possibly can. My two brothers, who needs no introductions, but you know what? Let's give it to them anyway. I want to start down below here. Mr. VashSky, Dr. Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed. How are you today, brother?
Hey, doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on, brother. Do appreciate it. Sorry, got a little bit of a cough, so if I mute myself and start coughing, don't panic. Don't worry, it's all good. But I really do appreciate you having me on. Hey, if you want to go ahead and follow me, you can go ahead and do so right down there at VashSky. Type in the Twitter, should pop up for all the what would Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say? She would say,
for all the robust
discussion. Go ahead and play the drop, OJ, there.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
The biggest bargain of all, that's right. And if you want to see me, well, one moment. Sorry, if you want to see me, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. And since we're talking about Walt Disney World as part of Citrus Corner, gotta use my magic bed to get in.
Absolutely. You have to. Just have to. And of course, the guy to my right, my right, your left, whatever it is, he's here, always here. If you didn't know he was there, then I don't know what channel you're watching here, folks. Mr. Orange Grove 55 himself. How you doing today, sir?
Doing fantastic, Mr. Family Man. Thank you so much for having me on Citrus Corner, talking some Walt Disney World, some D23 Expo. There was a lot to break down with this. I'm really excited, and let's rock and roll, baby.
Here we go. And before we get started with all the, as Mr. VashSky calls it, those robust discussions, a little disclaimer before we start. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Florida residents that are going through hard times right now. They are prepping and preparing for Hurricane Ian, who is coming up from the Gulf Coast and should hit landfall sometime between during the time of this recording, later on tonight into the early tomorrow morning into the next day or so. So this is going to be a heavy-hitting hurricane that they said has not impacted the entire state of Florida like this in over 40 years. So, you know, for the people who are leaving the state, trying to leave the state, trying to hunker down, you know, our thoughts and prayers are with you. And please, you know, be vigilant and stay safe.
Well, and, you know, being like kind of in this space, this theme park space, especially this Disney theme park space, you know, it's inevitable. You're gonna meet people and make friends from either California or Florida, right? Because that's kind of where we are, right? I mean, a lot of these Disney fans are, and we have a lot of mutual friends in Florida that we love dearly, very, very close friends, and it's a scary time right now for them over there. So hopefully this hurricane loses some steam as it makes landfall, and hopefully damage is extremely minimal and no one gets hurt. But we'll definitely be keeping our eye on it. And like George said, our thoughts, prayers are absolutely with our friends and everybody in Florida.
I echo every single one of your sentiments. We have a lot of friends, and in some cases family out there in Florida. So we really do hope that that everything, you know, like OG said, you know, there will be minimal damage. There will be, if there's any power loss, it'll be and not for very long, and that whole thing. It's going to be tough out there for the next couple of days, and like everybody has said already, our thoughts and prayers are with them. I think all of the theme parks have announced closures, right? At least the big ones: SeaWorld, Universal, Disney. I think Walt Disney World is almost at capacity in terms of their resort hotel stays, and from what we hear, it's you can't leave your room kind of thing. I mean, it's that kind of storm.
And I've been getting notifications through Disney. So the latest update was after the fact that they announced that they were going to be closing for 2 days. Again, during the time of this recording would be tomorrow, September 28th, and then the next day, September 29th. Now, that's just right now, depending on the impact of when the storm hits. Will they extend those closures? Will there be more delays? We will find out, as time goes on. We'll let you guys know via Twitter or some other social media platform. But as of right now, it's just for the 2 days.
I see. And from what we understand, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, all major landmarks or buildings are set to reach a certain code of in terms of hurricane resistance, and I believe they're all resistant up to a hurricane. What is it? Level 5, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Yes, and so far this hurricane is at a level 4, so they can still withstand a lot of heavy rainfall and damaging winds. But they are anticipating that when the hurricane does hit the mainland, it should reduce down to a category 2. So that's what they're hoping. I hope that's the case, especially as it moves further into the state itself.
I see. Well, again, everybody, obviously you're doing what you feel is best, taking shelter, evacuating, whatever you're doing. We hope you're safe, and hopefully if you're watching this, no matter what conditions are going on, hopefully this takes your mind off things for a little bit. So, George, you want to go ahead and take it away for us?
Absolutely. So we're gonna now get into some. I'm just going to call it, folks. This is a citrus corner. I go balls to the wall. We're going to get into some deep shit right now. Let's just get right into it.
Let's do it.
So I was able to attend the latest D23 Expo in Anaheim, California from September 9th to the 11th. Always on the last day that they decide to have the parks and products and experiences presentation, or as I call everything but parks presentation. But so, but I digress. I think this year was a little bit more better than the last couple parks. I will actually say that. But they made some announcements, some meet and greets, the certain fireworks shows coming back, new fireworks shows coming, nighttime spectaculars being replaced with the crappy ones that we have now, thank God. And then the conversation kind of drove into something that I didn't expect, and I'm for sure the other 7,500 people didn't know, that Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro brought out Chris Beatty, who is a portfolio concept Imagineer, and Jennifer Lee, who is the head of the Disney Animation. And, when you see the head of Disney Animation and someone with a concept art portfolio from WDI, you think, okay, this is going to be something big. And the news was kind of big in a sense, but it wasn't a guaranteed. It was a what if, and that's what kind of caught us all scratching our heads. Is this happening or is this not? So kind of shed a little light on this subject. We're going to start off with the first announcement that they had made, or as I said, lack thereof. And it is going into Disney's Animal Kingdom. And primarily the focus of that was Dino Land USA. Now, we all know that Dino Land is the weakest out of all the lands in Disney's Animal Kingdom. And we know that they just removed Primeval Whirl. They have an empty space in Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama. And so we knew it was coming. We just didn't know what. So the big what if happens to be they gave us a Zootopia announcement, which we thought that was going to be the land. And then they said, well, no. What if it was Zootopia? But what if it's Moana? And then Chris ends up bringing what you see in front of you right now up on the huge screen of what could possibly take the place of Dino Land USA. And in front of you is basically the angle of what it looks like is the Moana land, which is the whole front part. That is Chester and Hester's Dino-Rama, because you could see the spinners there. They must be, if they were to do this, they would keep that and just replace it with a new skin, probably with the Kakamora that would take the place of Triceratops spin.
Kind of similar to what they did with Inside Out over here in Disney California Adventure. They took Flick's Flyers, just reskinned it, and now it's a brand new attraction in a new area.
Right. And then it looks like a water flume ride of Moana with the Wayfinder. That looks like that would be where Primeval Whirl recently reside. And then beyond that, you can kind of see the city of Zootopia. And I'm assuming based on the concept art angle, that's what would look like where Dinosaur is. So what's your take on it, fellas? Like, as far as, do you think this is a possibility? Do you think there's some hope? Because especially because when we dive into the bigger one, this piece of concept art looks more fleshed out than the next one.
It does. It looks like, and I think the most important thing to preface with all of this is that, like, this is what if, and I am hesitant. I mean, I was just listening to the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill and Len Testa, and they were saying that does this even really count as blue sky, or does this count as, I don't know, green sky? Before you even get to blue, And I'm kind of agree. This is very much like we're in the process here, and very unusual format to even bring this out. We'll talk about that more later, but I kind of want to set that stage here. But if we were going to put on our Imagineering caps just for a second, kind of see this through, my feeling is what's most likely to come out of this is Zootopia. I mean, we've heard that for years. I think that's a shoo-in. I think, based on Shanghai getting what they're getting right now, you've already developed a Zootopia attraction / land, right, for that kind of for that franchise. So dropping it into Animal Kingdom seems pretty straightforward to me. Now, apparently, Len Testa did have an interesting quote about this, and it's basically what I've been telling OG. So it was kind of funny hearing it from him through. Basically, he was talking to an Imagineer. And you were talking about the concept of dropping Zootopia into Animal Kingdom, and we had heard for years how Joe Rohde was very resistant to the idea. He even made some social media posts about it and said, "Hey, look, listen, it's not really a human story. It's just an animal story. It's a human story told by animals. It's not really consistent with Animal Kingdom's vision." And apparently, that's the story that Len Testa relayed to an Imagineer who was, associated with these projects in Animal Kingdom specifically. And he says, well, Joe Rohde's not here now, is he? That's basically what we got back. And so I hear that. I see this. I see Shanghai. I see we've already developed this in-house. Plop it down in Animal Kingdom. I think that's a go. Moana, I'm really unsure of.
Okay, now let me ask you fellas this, because I find it kind of interesting that they brought up Zootopia first, then Moana, but in this concept art, Moana is the forefront of this, and they have Zootopia shown in the back where there's not a whole lot of detail. You could just kind of see. So does that mean that they were more further along with Moana than Zootopia? Even though that they're making one in Shanghai, were they maybe considering doing it a little bit differently?
It kind of seems that way. It kind of seems like the Moana thing might be further along. Like you make a great point, George, that there's more detail. I have all the respect in the world for Joe Rohde. I mean, this is his park, so who am I to say, right? I mean, but in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I think Zootopia leans. I understand what he's saying, where it's a human story told by animals, but it's not the same as like Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, for example. I mean, really, they don't have. Mickey, Donald, and Goofy don't necessarily lean into like what they are. Like Mickey Mouse doesn't live in a mouse hole. He does, you know what I'm saying? Right. He's basically a human being that looks like a mouse. And same with Goofy and Donald. The characters in Zootopia lean into their animal attributes. It's the movie is called Zootopia. It leans into the animals. Yes, it might be a human story, but it's very much seen through that animal lens. So that's why I don't really think it's contradicting the theme too much, because it's about animals. I mean, it is. Well, I get it. It's an animal.
It's this disconnect between. We talk about this with Star Wars and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, right?
Yeah.
People expect to see Star Wars and Star Wars Land. I think people make a similar association with Disney's Animal Kingdom. Do they get the? Obviously, there's a lot of conservatory kind of. Theming going on there, and some conservationist ideas and all of that, and that's all great, and that is absolutely fantastic. But when you ask the general audience, what do they expect? They expect animals, and well, Zootopia kind of fits in line there. The executives know this, the fans know this, so who's really pushing back? A creator who's not really there anymore. In a very similar way where it's like, hey, the fans want Star Wars. People want Star Wars at their Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, right? The executives want it, the fans want it. Who's really holding it up? The creatives. So I think it's one of those things, and to your point, OG, I think we're past it. I think even the creatives now are on board. Get Zootopia in here.
Well, and can I ask, what does Moana have to do with animals? I mean, at least Zootopia, I can understand that. I can make the case. Moana has nothing to do with animals.
Yeah, that was more of my take back. I was like, Moana, really? Like, I thought like the whole entire presentation of this would have been just all Zootopia.
I think
it's like the way of nature with water,
right?
And I think like that's the route that they were taking, sort of like how they did with Pandora. You know, it's a fictional sense, but it's like the story and the message behind of like the culture and the people. Being
one with nature, it extends more than just through animals, right? So being one with nature could be, you know, the islands in which a story like Moana could take place, and how the waters of the ocean interacts with it, and so forth. I think that's kind of where they're going here with a Moana inclusion. Now, it's kind of interesting because we're getting Moana in Epcot, so it's like, Moana here, Moana there. And I do agree with you, George. I think they are kind of further along in this concept. However, I don't think there's much to develop with Zootopia, and if I had to pick just one, I think really Zootopia is going to be the one.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. But I think that's also Disney's forte. They always like to try to find a couple movies here and there, and they'll just like drag them through with everything. Let's put them in this entertainment show. Let's put them in this fireworks show. And Moana is actually one of them. She's incorporated in most of the fireworks shows, the nighttime spectacular. She's now going to be incorporated in the updated version of Walt Disney World's Fantasmic, you know, when it opens with Tron in 2037. That, you know,
you're about right. You're about right.
Yeah.
A little bit early, but okay.
Luckily, we did kind of get a idea point of spring 2023 with Tron. So I am happy about that. I would have preferred to actually have a date, you know, but, you know, it is what it is.
I believe the Nielsen numbers just came out for streaming movies, I believe in the month of August, if I'm not mistaken. And Disney had 2 in the top 10. One of those was Moana. So it's like it still does extremely well on Disney Plus. This is still something that I think people kind of expect to be associated with Disney parks kind of going forward. The second was Encanto, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I think with Jennifer Lee and Chris Beatty out there, I think pretty much they're looking at the franchises within the last 10 years most prominently. It's not to say that we won't get something even later, which we'll get into further in this discussion. However, that's going to be the focus, I think, for them. And if you look at that top 10 list that Nielsen just put out, I mean, it would be foolish not to include some concepts that feature both Moana and Encanto.
And when Josh D'Amaro introduced them and they came out, where it was like, okay, the mix of Disney animation and WDI, you started hearing people saying, it's Zootopia. We're getting Zootopia, because he also introduced to the fact of that, it was going in Animal Kingdom. So it was like everyone just kind of put two and two together. But before we move on to the thicker meat of this Thanksgiving,
I actually wanted to say one thing before we move on.
Yeah.
Look, with all said and done, right? At the end of the day, I am just excited that we might get something new. That's all. Something new. I'm just excited. So a little Jungle Cruise humor there. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, wait. I'm sorry. Before we move on, can you bring back that concept art really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when I did see this at the expo, this kind of, because we are going to segue into talking a little bit about this, but if you look at the Moana attraction over to the left, the log flume type of attraction, doesn't it kind of resemble of what we are supposed to be getting, quote unquote, at a certain, I don't know, Bayou Adventure?
Yeah.
And that was like the first thing that kind of threw to me, because it had that look to it. So it's like, are they making a doppelganger? Are they, in case if this doesn't work out, we could always put it as a Moana attraction. If it was just something that I thought was interesting, because the second I looked at that, I was like, it's one in the same. Like they just showed this for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and now they're kind of showing, because and I know this is just a piece of concept art, things change all the time, but I mean, it's like, minus the water tower, I mean,
it's pretty close. I mean, no question. OG, what do you think about this?
I think it's interesting. I mean, I would actually be very, very curious how Disney would approach that. I would be open to have because we don't really have, as far as I can know off the top of my head, I don't think Disney has ever really tackled a log flume since Splash Mountain, have they?
Nope.
I think that's the only one. So I'd be very curious to see how they tackle a second log flume attraction. Now, Disney has reused ride systems before. I mean, Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean are essentially the same ride system,
Yeah.
Midway Mania,
Space, Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, exactly. Midway Mania, Web Slingers, right? Yep. But they've never done it with a log flume. So I'd be very curious how they would tackle a Moana log flume in that same kind of vein as Splash Mountain. I think that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah. I echo a lot of OG sentiments. It's kind of interesting because if you think about Animal Kingdom, I mean, outside of Cali River Rapids, I think there could be some expansion in the kind of water ride market there, right? So to do kind of a log flume, and you could even make it a little bit more canoe-like, right? That would kind of tie it back into the Moana story even closer. And I think people would welcome that. Obviously, Splash Mountain has been, largely seen as one of the top rides at Walt Disney World for going on decades now. Why wouldn't we bring a concept like that to Animal Kingdom, who I think, one, needs another water attraction. We'll see, because this is also kind of interesting, too. Pandora is apparently getting an expansion sometime soon. Apparently, the Imagineers have wanted to do this for a long, long time. I mean, even executives have been kind of bullish on this idea. James Cameron is kind of the thing holding it up, because from his perspective, it's like, hey, let's wait for these next few films to be released, see what not only the audience reaction would be, but also to what concepts we bring forward within these films, and then base something off of those. And when I hear, Avatar, The Way of Water, I think it is, it's like,
Yes.
maybe that's your water ride. So a Battle of the Water Rides here, I think, is what we might be looking at.
And Animal Kingdom already has a water ride, Cali River Rapids. So if they
Right.
could end up with 3 in one park, but I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it because I mean, it's Florida. You mean you get the heat and the humidity, and there's only 2 parks out of the 4 that have water rides, and that's Magic Kingdom for Splash and Cali River for Animal Kingdom. Epcot and Hollywood Studios don't have water attractions.
Well, and speaking of Pandora, the re-release of Avatar after 13 years now or something like that.
13.
Right?
I mean, the re-release this past weekend, it made like $30 million. I mean, it's crazy. This movie is still pulling solid numbers. So a lot of people think that maybe the Way of Water might not do well. I actually think it's going to do very, very well. And if it does very, very well, which I think it will, there's a good chance that you guys get that Pandora expansion over there at Animal Kingdom. Absolutely. And that's a cool environment. I think that'd be a real cool environment to play with and expand upon.
And wait till you guys actually see it in person next year.
That I am very much looking forward to. Now, interesting too. You say 3 water rides, George. One might think, oh, that's a little bit too much. But from what we have heard, and from what I remember experiencing, Animal Kingdom is the hottest park of them all because it kind of traps in the heat because of the dense foliage and so forth. It's concrete walkways, and it's a bad mix for the Florida sun. So I can kind of understand why they might be looking in that direction. Also, too, interestingly enough, Pandora was, when it was announced in 2011, not as part of the D23 Expo, by the way, but it's a whole nother can of worms. Sometimes things don't make the expo, they make it just after. As we just learned today with the whole Deadpool Wolverine announcement, but that's a whole nother thing. Anyway, with Avatar, when it was originally announced, this was announced as something that wasn't just going in Walt Disney World. It was going to be brought out all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we now hear possibly bring it over to Paris. We now hear possibly bring it over to Tokyo as part of a 3rd theme park out there. That's not been announced or been talked about much, but that's pretty much coming, folks. And that might incorporate Star Wars, the Galactic Star Cruiser thing, and that's a whole nother can of worms there. But I think the Avatar franchise, now after getting $30 million at the recent box office for, like you said, a 10-year-old film, more than a 10-year-old film, OG. Right. This is a franchise that I think Disney really believes in, and you can bet your bottom dollar, out of any of the things we talk about today, the most likely thing and the most eminent thing probably is going to be a Pandora expansion.
Yeah, I agree. I think for Dinoland USA, it's pretty obvious it's going to be Zootopia. And then right after Zootopia, the next round again, Animal Kingdom, it's going to be Pandora. Will Moana get in, with the mix? Possibly. But I think that they'll lean more towards Zootopia first and then even Pandora before even touching Moana.
Now, I have a question for you fellows. And this is a Disneyland question, so I don't really want to digress too far into this, but it is related to Pandora, and that's why I want to kind of address it.
Sure.
The motorboat cruise area sits right in between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. Well, Avatar would actually be kind of a perfect franchise to sit in that spot because it embraces the Fantasyland side. It's obviously a fantasy film, but it also embraces the Tomorrowland side with all the tech and technology incorporated into that. Now, we're all assuming it's going to be frozen. Is it possible that area right there is a little mini Pandora? Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there.
I will say this. If you actually said that to me like 5-6 years ago, that Pandora, in Disneyland, I'll be like, oh, gee, you're freaking nuts. It's like, that's not going to. But if someone also would have had that same argument to say, you know what, they're going to reroute the whole entire Rivers of America, and they're going to put in a Star Wars themed land in the back of
Right.
Disneyland Park, again, I'd be like, you must be out of your mind. What is that going to look like? And it fits perfectly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in my opinion, I still feel it's Frozen.
Yeah, me too.
But to your point, OG, I do think that if they did decide to go out of the Frozen themed type of genre, I couldn't see why Pandora wouldn't be a perfect fit, because it is. It blends perfectly between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland, because it's like a hybrid film, is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
I'd have to, yeah. It's kind of an interesting concept. I never really quite considered it before. I'd have to look at the spatial constraints and see whether or not even any of these Pandora concepts that we've not only heard about but I've seen implemented so far could even fit back there. The way I've always heard it is Pandora gets saved for the third park.
Okay.
And maybe not necessarily implemented in an existing gate currently. Sort of how, like I said, Tokyo's maybe doing some things.
Yeah.
Again, another discussion. But I think George makes a very fair point. If Frozen's not on the table, Avatar does kind of fit there. A little bit. I think they like to keep castle IP in the castle parks, let's say, so I think Frozen's a little bit more what is it, obvious, let's say. But it's an interesting idea, OG. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we're gonna kind of dive into what this video is all about here. We're going to get into some really heavy meat and potatoes, as Mr. VashSky likes to call it. That now the next segment that they decided to move to, which I actually thought they were going to move to Hollywood Studios, because Mr. VashSky and I had many conversations over the phone about the rotation of Walt Disney World, of how they select each park for a particular purpose, and they make an announcement. They take 10, 15, 75 years for that one attraction, and then they move on to the next park. Yeah, so after Animal Kingdom, it was only suiting that it would be Hollywood Studios, but no, they threw us another curveball. They take us back to Magic Kingdom while we're still waiting for Tron. We're still waiting to even hear what Tiana's Bayou Adventure is all about. And they take us into Frontierland yet again. And this time they focus on Big Thunder. And how Chris had
Beyond the Spires?
Beyond the Spires of Big Thunder. What is beyond that mountain? And what I thought, the first things when they brought up Big Thunder, I thought, oh my gosh, this thing's getting the axe. People are going to start rioting in here. Yeah. It's like, it's bad enough we're losing Splash. We're going to lose Big Thunder too. And it's like, and then when he said Beyond, I'm like, okay, what are they referring to? And I thought maybe they were going to give Big Thunder a storyline, like an extended storyline with a plot and characters. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this will kind of tie into Tiana's Bayou Adventure, because for all of you who don't know, that Tiana's Bayou Adventure is going into Disneyland. It fits perfectly with the New Orleans style bayou type of thing with Critter Country. It kind of all fits. With Walt Disney World, you have Frontierland. So you're going to place from New Orleans 1920s, plop it right into a Midwestern type of gulch, if you will, with a runaway mine train. How does that fit?
Right.
And I think this kind of maybe would answer it. So again, going off of the what ifs, they started to describing, well, what if you entered in through the Mexican village of Coco, and they take you and it transports you into the world of the dead, and with all the like the Mexican festivities and the culture and everything. And everyone started applauding because they thought, okay, that's what it is. I thought it was kind of interesting because Epcot has a Mexican pavilion, and that's where we thought Coco was going to go, but we're going to put it in Magic Kingdom. It's like,
And
okay.
they even kind of alluded to it, right? Because they had like this, like the guitars up against, the Mexico Pavilion on the projection model that they had over there in the Odyssey building and stuff.
And if you actually enter in through the Mexican Pavilion before you go into ride the Grand Fiesta Tour with the Three Caballeros and visit the indoor-outdoor town market, which is really cool. It's indoors, but it looks like the night sky. It's really cool that they have a Coco sort of entranceway where you see like models and photos of the film and everything. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but then Jennifer Lee pipes in and she's like, but wait, no, but that might be it. But like, what if we do decide to talk about Bruno? And then everyone started cheering and hooting and hollering because they all knew what that was about. Is for Encanto, that they were talking about going through this magical, mystical house, and you can, live out your own adventure through the lens of
the Magritte family, that kind of the story of, hey, what if you got to choose your own door and discovered your own special power kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so then they were talking about it a little bit, and then Josh just throws us a complete curveball because you could kind of tie Coco and Encanto together. We were talking about it a little bit last night, kind of have like that Spanish type of culture background because they kind of mesh well together. And they made a bomb drop, so to speak, of something that was talked about for many years in the Disney community that was rumored to have its own park and what have you, and it's an entire land run by the Disney villains. Well, I tell you what, if you probably could hear the entire audience screaming through any part of that Anaheim Convention Center. I kid you not. Like, they couldn't control people. They had to wait till we were done clapping and cheering and everything. So then that's when they bring up this concept art. And again, I thought it was kind of interesting because it seems like beyond the spire, you enter through Coco, and to the right side is Encanto. Now, I'm assuming to the left side of the entrance, that's still part of Coco.
I mean,
I'm not sure.
It's hard to say. From what I have heard, to put some more flesh on these bones, we actually kind of, when pre-gaming the show yesterday, actually, we came up to some pretty good conclusions here. And from what I have found recently doing research for this show, that's pretty much what they're thinking. So here's a map here. And here's kind of what they're envisioning for this whole thing. In a very similar way that Star Wars Galaxy's Edge provided for the first time a connection point between Splash Mountain and Critter Country to Frontierland, from what I have heard, they envision a very similar concept, but with these three lands providing a connection point between Frontierland as it currently exists and either Liberty Square or Fantasyland proper. That's what I have heard.
Now, if you could bring up the concept art really quick, because this is what we were talking about. So if you look at the angle of this concept art of where the tip of the spire for Big Thunder is, it's kind of angled that it's kind of looking more towards, if you're looking at it through a map's point of view, northeast. From the tip of the spire. So anything beyond, especially with the Encanto area, that looks like it would run into where the Liberty Riverboat's path goes. So do they now have to reroute the water mainway, sort of like how they did with Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland?
I think that's the plan. I think the plan is to shorten the river in a very similar way that Disneyland just experienced for for the installation of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and then with that kind of shortened river footprint, that provides you all the land in the world up until basically Florida Way or Floridian Way to connect these two pieces together, honestly. And I think that's where they're going.
Well, and here's the brilliance of this. Scroll down just a little bit, Drake.
Yeah.
Okay, right here, up a little bit, just a tad. Okay, so this is the brilliance of this concept, because if you connect Frontierland with Fantasyland, on the Frontierland side, you're going to have more of the Spanish influence, right? With Coco and Kanto, which actually works very, very well with that kind of Southwest theme. We already see it kind of at Disneyland here in Anaheim with Dia los Muertes celebrations, the Rancho del Zocolo. I'm sorry, I'm massacring the names. I sound like super
de los
white when I
Muertos
try to...
and Rancho de Zocalo.
There we go. There we go. But it works well with that Frontierland theme, that Southwest kind of theme, right? So you're gonna have this kind of like this new land with Encanto and Coco connecting to Frontierland.
Yes.
Chef's kiss, perfect. And then as you move over, you have the Villain Land, which connects perfectly with New Fantasyland.
Right.
So it really is this kind of perfect spectrum of like, I don't know. I really like this. I really like these concepts.
Now,
And I think the spot they picked for it, I think couldn't be better, honestly.
Now, the thing that George alluded to before is kind of what I'm hearing the plan is on the other side of that. So now you've taken Frontierland and you've kind of expanded out towards the top of the river. And then you have the Villains Land, kind of that is what goes into Fantasyland. But what happens to the south of Big Thunder, which kind of is most concerning right now, because how do you get Splash Mountain to integrate with Big Thunder? Well, what if you didn't? What if you took Splash Mountain, now Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and integrate it with a redone Pecos Bill restaurant providing for Tiana's Palace, and maybe go as far as Pirates of the Caribbean, and now you have maybe a new New Orleans area. And that right there is what kind of cohesively brings all that together. So it's, you're taking Frontierland and you're shifting it to the top end is kind of what you're doing. Honestly, this is pretty brilliant, but also very ambitious.
Yeah. It's a daunting task. That could it be done? Yes, absolutely. Disney can definitely pull it off. It's just a matter of time, that rather than, okay, you got the main idea, so stop sitting around a round table and discussing it, and let's go out and build this thing. Let's do it.
And that's, I'm so glad you brought that up, George, because I have heard, Jason Surrell, who's actually written Disney books on Imagineering, right? He famously left Imagineering quite some years ago for Universal Creative, and he was asked, why'd you make this transition? And he basically said, look, listen, Disney, they talk about building rides. Universal, we actually build them. And to see the kind of embodiment of that on stage at the Parks panel, it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, this is what Imagineering has been talking about. We always talk about building attractions. We never actually build them. And to be honest, I mean, the current management at Disney, they're not theme park fans. Chapek, I think, is, but not everybody shares that view. And let's be honest, unless Universal actually starts cannibalizing business, unless it starts affecting the stock price, unless these things actually have a negative a negative impact on Disney's bottom line, that's when they are actually in the business of theme parking. And that's kind of, I think, where this whole conversation kind of really starts and ends. What happens when Epic Universe opens?
And I think that would be the perfect way to answer the call as far as good, healthy competition goes between both companies. And it also will answer to the call that we all have been discussing, like when Tiana's Bayou Adventure does come, especially at Walt Disney World, how is that going to look? And I think this is not only, it kills two birds with one stone, so to speak. It answers to the call of Epic Universe, but it also answers the question as far as storyline goes, that you kind of transform Frontierland by extending it, but cutting off its originality in the forefront. And as you mentioned, Dre, kind of turning it into a New Orleans style with Tiana's restaurant, with the attraction. So that I can definitely see. But I mean, I would love to see Coco and Kanto, and especially the Villains Like I'm like waiting for that to happen.
Well, I have a concept kind of for the Tiana ride. The whole concept behind this new attraction, right, is that she runs this restaurant business, and I guess she's looking for ingredients or something in this salt mine. I guess that's basically the gist of it. But with that overall backstory, she doesn't necessarily have to stay in New Orleans. I mean, she could be in the Southwest looking for some other thing she needs for her restaurant, and you can have it Southwest themed with Tiana, like on, like, you know, kind of like we even see her in the concept art, like in like a safari outfit or something, right? Very outdoorsy looking. What's stopping them from doing something like that to tie it into Frontierland?
Well, I think they're really, I don't know, dead set on this kind of integration with New Orleans. And again, I mean, you know, I might play the clip, but Jim Hill and Lynn Testa actually went into this, and Jim Hill was talking about how it's like, how do you go from Tiana, which is Ray, Louis the Alligator, Dr. Facilier, all that, to Salt Mines, Tabasco Co-op. You know, it's a long way to get from point A to point B, and I think, you know, they're looking to be so authentic. They're looking to be so driven by this idea that we reflect New Orleans, and we reflect this kind of, you know, let's say a more diverse, progressive notion on the Tiana story and on Splash Mountain in general because of its past and so forth. And they're kind of impacted by all these different things. And it's like, we still have to get a really great attraction. And look, OG, I think you're right. I think you can have this story go anywhere. From what we understand, that's the excuse for the Tiana's Palace. Maybe, you know, if they do Pecos Bills as Tiana's Palace, and from what I'm understanding, Hungry Bear is the other location. You know, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to reflect exactly what we see in the film because, well, she has now a food empire that she has franchise locations kind of thing. So I do think you're right. I think you can have this Splash Mountain, Walt Disney World, Tiana's Bayou Adventure story take place wherever you want it to be, but they're just, I don't think they're really necessarily driven by creative for this attraction. I think they're driven by all these other things that are getting in the way.
Well, what you're saying is basically the stories matter. The stories matter group doesn't care about story. It's not about story. It's not about story at all. It's about, you know, hey, look at us, inclusive, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the creative end, like you said, Dre, the creative end, the story and all that is taking the back seat when and the signaling is really in the driver's seat. And that's unfortunate.
It is, and I have a piece of audio here for you.
Sure, is this
I want
Jim
you
Hill?
to listen to? Yeah, and
okay.
I think you've listened to it before. OG.
Is it? What's the name of his podcast, by the way, so I can give him proper credit?
Yeah, Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill.
Perfect.
But you know, when he said this, it was just like the you know. This is kind of what I've been alluding to for a lot of these shows. And to have it put so articulately, I mean, this kind of gets at the heart of the issue. So I want to go ahead and play it for you guys, and I want you guys to react to it because I think it is really kind of important. Here we go.
But what
here we go.
have been hearing from various parties involved here is that the quest to make this authentic and at the same time making sure that every reference to Song of the South is removed from this thing. Yeah. It's now gone from being a fun ride with some controversial elements to an earnest, well-meaning ride, which, you know, you're in the Magic Kingdom. It's like, well, what are we doing next? Oh, let's go on the earnest, well-meaning ride. That's what I want on my vacation.
You know, and that's kind of it. I mean, that's it right there. It's you've now gone from I think a very fun concept that people were genuinely excited about. I mean, we talked to Ashton, we talked to some others. They were really looking forward to this thing. But when you break it down, that well, maybe this doesn't necessarily, it's not going to fit your expectation of what a Tiana ride's going to be. They kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I like that now or not. But we're just driving towards that end goal, and I don't know. It gets me nervous.
I mean, for me, when they said that they were going to retheme Splash Mountain to Princess and the Frog, it's exactly what it was titled as, Princess and the Frog. It would be the storyline from the movie. And it's kind of like they're giving us mixed messages of really what it's about, because they talk about this type of storyline, but then when they bring Anika Noni Rose out, who provides the speaking and the singing voice for Tiana, which she has a hell of a set of vocals. I mean,
Oh yeah.
beyond
yes,
brilliant. You know, she's phenomenal. But she sings the songs from the movie. It's nothing tied into what the ride is about, because this is supposed to be after the film takes place. And then they show us this supposedly light mist bayou magic thing that apparently no one has ever seen before, but yet every time I turn around, it's somewhere else. That it's like, that's really the big news that you had to drop to us at the expo. There was nothing else.
I don't think they know. You know,
No, they don't.
to be quite
They
frank.
don't.
And you know, from what I've been hearing, it's you know, Theme Park Wizard and I were talking over the phone, and George, you brought it up. It's like, you know, you have the songs from the film being performed right in front of you. Why couldn't you have performed any of the number of new songs that you plan on incorporating in this attraction? Because from what we understand, new songs are coming. So it's like, okay, well, then play those songs for us and give us an idea of what you're, you know, coming up with. Even if it's not concept artwork or video animatics or whatever, at least give us something to go on. And they didn't even do that. And it's like, you had the performers there, and you just performed the songs that I mean, maybe they're going to be in the attraction, maybe they're not going to be in the attraction. And it's like,
But again,
this is your
Disney
moment to
doesn't know.
showcase that.
Yeah, but Disney doesn't know. I truly feel like they don't know, and they're stalling time until they can come up with an actual game plan of what they're going to do with this attraction.
Now, Jim Hill provides some context for this, and I want to go ahead and let's go down the bayou and go down this story here, because I think this is fascinating. Apparently, the original story, we were at OG, our sources were correct. It was going to be finding Lewis's trumpet, and that was going to be the basis for this attraction. And you were going to see Tiana just as she had transformed right after the events of the film, and then maybe at the end there. Well, apparently that didn't necessarily go down very well, because they focus grouped it, and they said, hey, look, listen, you really have to have Tiana integrated into this attraction even more than you already have. And it's like, okay, we'll go ahead and redo the storyline a little bit. Now we've pushed it back 5 years. Now she has this kind of food co-op thing, and now, okay, we're looking for a special ingredient. Okay, you take it to the people that you're consulting with in New Orleans, and they're saying, you understand, we don't have mountains here. You know, we don't have any elevation which to speak of. And it's like, okay, what's your highest point? Well, outside of, I guess, a garbage dump, our highest elevation is a salt mine. And it's like, okay. And so we have to incorporate the salt mine element to make this make sense and have it be completely authentic. And you're creating this thing by committee, by, you know, the kind of social narrative, by all these different things. And you've gotten so far away from the story that it's like,
Nothing else matters.
yeah, nothing else matters. Is this going to necessarily be consistent with expectation? Yeah, story doesn't. Well, it's the story that they're crafting here.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a very, very intricate. It's very creative, but it's not at all associated with what we associate currently with Tiana. That's the problem.
Now, Tiana is supposed to get her own little mini series on Disney Plus.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's going to be any integration as far as the storyline with that goes.
I would hope so, but did we get any details on when it was going to be released?
They
Tiana?
mentioned nothing of that at the expo.
So I wonder if you're right,
I
George.
think
wonder if
recently it was delayed, wasn't it? I thought it was recently delayed.
So I think
I
George
think the
is right.
Moana store. I think there was a Moana and a Tiana show, and I think
Yeah.
the Moana show got bumped up, and then
Before
the Tiana show is
Tiana.
to be
Yeah.
and Tiana is to be announced. I think at this point.
Maybe the purpose of that, to what George had stated here, is to integrate it into this attraction and provide a backstory by which really interlinks in some way to really kind of give you, I think, what is it? A presentation before the ride, let's say, a kind of a tie-in that really explains this attraction. Because I don't know what the complexity is of this storyline. I don't think the guest is going to see even a tenth of this, honestly, when they're on the actual attraction. So how do you set them up properly? You might be doing that with the show. That's why it's delayed.
I think as far as the storyline goes, that's the route they're going to go, and especially what they're going to do with this expansion beyond Big Thunder. I think it will tie in well, but again, I think that they're stalling time because they have to get the ball rolling on everything else. Now, if you actually bring up that piece of concept art again,
Yes, sir.
actually, while we were talking about Tiana's Bayou Adventure, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when I said that the center part is Coco, and then I had asked that on the upper left side of that, is that an extension of Coco? I do believe that is. I would think that was where their main attraction is going to go, because that building looks like the building that Miguel enters into the world of the dead, and that's where Chris was mentioning about, okay, you get to ride the I don't know the technical name for it, that oversized.
Oh, the oversized cat creature. Yeah, sorry. Look, listen, don't worry, George. I'm of Mexican descent.
Yeah.
I don't know either. So it's I have no idea. However, it's I believe it was Beatty who was talking about how you'd be able to ride in the back of that creature, and fly through the world of Dias de los Muertos.
That's Mortos.
Now, I think you're right. And if you look here, I think that was like the tomb type structure in the middle of the graveyard.
Yeah,
that's kind of where you would enter. That looks most appropriate.
I think that would be the queue. I think that would be the queue. You enter the world of the dead, and then that's where you go on the attraction if this was to come to fruition and everything. And I also had to mention, kind of looking, and then, by the way, folks, further off into the distance, that's where the villain's lair is, because you can kind of see two type of figures beyond in the distance for the villains. The first one would look like the Forbidden Mountain, which is the layer of Maleficent. And then further beyond that, you can kind of see a certain demon gargoyle figure. Do we know, I think, a type of Disney villain?
I think we do.
Yeah.
I think we do.
Chernabog.
Chernabog.
That would be amazing. And that's the thing they really have to do with this land. This is the one thing that I'm a little concerned about with the villains thing. I mean, the little bit we see here, the silhouettes look awesome. But the one worry I do have, being that it's in the Magic Kingdom, is that they're not going to go hard into the creepiness. I want to see a lot of gothic, kind of creepy architecture. I really hope they don't like Mickey's Not So Scary this whole land up, where it's not scary and it's very watered down. I want the villain's land to be creepy as fuck and sinister and gothic and just awesome. Do not water this land down, please, please. And it's in a castle park, so I am concerned, because the history with these is that they tend to do that, and that's why I love, that's why things like Oogie Boogie Bash do so well at like DCA, is because they don't have to abide by that same kind of perimeter that you have to with Disneyland, right? So please just make it creepy and gothic and awesome looking. Do not water us down. Make it, don't talk down to children and all that. We'll see. I don't know. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. I'll just say that.
Well, and the big rumor for the villains for the longest time was that was going to be the fifth gate. The villains was supposed to get an entire theme park. So I think that if they was to do something of that you're going into a theme park knowing that the entire thing is based off of villains, you can kind of have that kind of scope of saying, okay, it could very well potentially be creepy, and have that hard edge to it. But to OG's point, I do feel like that it does have upon the question too that, if you're going to put this in Magic Kingdom, is it going to be watered down? What's your thoughts?
That's the thing. I think we were kind of spitballing ideas yesterday in preparation for the show. And look, OG is exactly correct. You got to do it creepy. You got to do it for real. You cannot do this kind of watered down, kid friendly take on it. I think the villains I mean, you can do that in some maybe subsections, but I think what people really want is to be immersed into this very atmospheric take on the villains, in not so a dissimilar way to maybe like Villains Grove out in Disney California Adventure Park as part of Oogie Boogie Bash. I mean, I was kind of thinking, it's like, man, if you were to translate that into a permanent showcase almost, where you're going through these environments and it is dark and creepy, and maybe at night you have an excellent lighting package that really brings this out on the kind of budget that the land requires, in a kind of a permanent showcase on the scale and so forth, to translate something like Villains Grove and like that as part of this Villains Land. I mean, that would be home run right out of the park. I mean, just home run right out of the park. It is largely seen as one of the best parts of Oogie Boogie Bash, and again, it's all just temporary lights. It's all just kind of set up, and it's very simple tricks to do that, but it's done in such a compelling way, and such a great way that it's like, just do that permanent, and that would be really, really cool.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't always have to go big to be better. And we were kind of talking about this last night when we brought up Chernobog, that if they were to do something like how they did the dragon at Gringotts for Wizarding World, so if you had like a gigantic audio animatronic Chernobog sitting on the top of Bald Mountain, and you have him enclosed in his wings, and then the wings open up with the background music and the sound effects, and then you would maybe have at night, you would have the spirits kind of rising up to the mountain with projection effects. I mean, like, you can really, that'd be killer.
What if you go on a dark ride with maybe even like a Sleeping Beauty inspired dark ride, right? Where you have that kind of medieval aesthetic. You have those, great tapestry like paintings brought to life from that film. And then you get a one-on-one encounter with a huge audio-animatronic Maleficent done for real in an enclosed, controlled environment. It's not just Maleficent sleeping like in Disneyland Paris. It's not just he's Murphy coming up for a show bit. No, it's part of an attraction, and it attacks you and all those kind of other things. We're just scratching the surface here, folks, of what they can do. The ideas are endless, and I think that's why, George, it was considered as a fifth gate at one period of time.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like, you even take Wizarding World, and you take the Forbidden Journey. You take a look at that dragon in the very beginning part of the ride. I mean, that thing is like so real, and it's so close to you. I mean, it's not even in the distance. It's like, talk about like 6 feet distance of separation. It's like, you could almost like reach out and touch it. And I think, if they did something like that with Maleficent as the dragon, and you have like a type of like green fire effects around you. I mean, and they already proven that they can do oversized dragons even at Paris. You walk through the dungeon area of the castle, and you have, their dragon. So I mean, Disney, is capable of doing this. It's just, are they willing to, take the time and the money to do that?
That's the problem. Even with that huge Thunderous applause, which from what I understand, I mean, it was reverberatory. It was huge. It was massive. One of the biggest exclamations from the crowd at any point during the expo. It was so big.
I haven't heard a crowd. I haven't heard. Oh, sorry, no, because I want you to continue. I haven't heard a crowd scream like that for something that Disney did since back in 2015 when Iger came out and says, "We're building 2 Star Wars lands." Like that was.
Right. I mean, it was huge. It was massive. Even then, Josh DeMauro says, well, we're thinking about it. And it's just like, come on. Let's commit ourselves to one of these things. From what I understand, Frozen at Disneyland. It was on the agenda. It was in the script. It was part of the Parks panel presentation. They were going to announce it. We were going to go forward with it. Hey, we're building, what is it? I guess 3, let's do 4, kind of thing, right? A take on the famous 2 line there. But, they scratched off the list right at the last second. I mean, and it's just like, oh, it's heartbreaking, that they have to kind of just I don't know, just kind of spoon feed us this stuff. It's like, come on, let's really commit here. But I think the company right now, where it's at right now. I mean, look, we started off this show talking about how Harmonious and Enchantment, they were failures. I mean, millions and millions of dollars poured into the Harmonious. I mean, oh God. I mean, I've heard numbers north of $70 million. I mean, unbelievable amounts of money. And it was supposed to be there for at least a decade. And I guess now I guess Len Testa was saying they were peppering in rumors throughout the media saying, oh, it was only supposed to be temporary. It's like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way that was supposed to be temporary. And yet they're already moving on from it. It's like,
and yet, if that was going to be temporary, then why didn't that come before Epcot Forever? Why give us Epcot Forever and then Harmonious and then back to Epcot Forever?
Exactly. Epcot Forever was only supposed to be, that was the temporary show. That was the one that was the intermediary show to give people a reason to eat out on Lagoon and watch something at night. I mean, that's what that was for. And yet we're bringing that back, and Harmonious is, I don't know what they're going to do, honestly. But it's like we had to recover from that. And then to have these two creatives up there on stage give us, I don't know, what they were talking about was coming. It's just like, are we going to even see a fourth of this? I mean, this is it. Here we go.
And how big would this section be? Would you say this would be the size, like if you combined all three together, if you combined Coco and Kanto and the villains?
So interesting. I was questioning that myself. What is the scale that we're looking at here? And Jim Hill and Len Testa actually talked about it on their podcast. They were going back and forth. And I guess Len Testa determined that with New Fantasyland, all the additions that came with it, they added about 5,000 people for the total park capacity of Magic Kingdom. So it's like, that's the kind of scale, right? They were saying for this, 10,000 plus easy. That's, I think,
So this is going to be an even bigger. This is going to be a much bigger scale, because
much bigger.
Because if you're going to think of the villains, you're not just going to do one little section to a 3-part. I mean, the villains alone would take up all of Coco and Encanto by itself.
And if you look at the room they have to work with, I mean, it is sizable, and they could very easily bump out Floridian Way if they need more. This could be relatively huge here if they were to go forward with it. The company's just not very ambitious right now, let's just say.
Yeah. Now I have one last question for you fellas, and I know Dre, you kind of already touched upon it, but in the words of Baymax, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the likelihood that these so-called what ifs, and that's even including with Animal Kingdoms, with Zootopia and Moana, what is your 1 to 10, 1 being never going to happen to 10, oh, this is like in the bag, it's going to happen. What's your number? Well,
it's complicated. So it gets us back to maybe why the what if segment even took place at all, really. And some people have really come to the determination that maybe this was a focus group kind of thing, where it's like, we're not really sure ourselves. Let's see what the audience thinks. And let's see what the conversation is online following something like this. And if you really think about it, I mean, JPEG and Josh G. Morrow and all of them, they are very much consumer oriented, let's say. They're very much like, we're going to take guest feedback and include them in our decision making going forward. So this is a reflection of that when you really think about it from that standpoint. The what if segment is a reflection of that philosophy. And when I hear the crowd and what they were enthusiastic about, the Villains Land shot right up there. I would say out of all of these concepts, I would say Zootopia is pretty much a shoo-in for me because they already have one in Shanghai. They're investing a bunch of money in that project in order to develop that around the world, right? Animal Kingdom absolutely needs the attractions. I think that's a for sure thing. Yeah. I'd say the second most likely thing beyond that, I would say it's the Villains Land. I mean, I think that one got a huge response. They know it would be successful no matter pretty much what they did, right? I think that's a for sure thing. And I think things beyond that fall kind of, they cascade downward. So on those two things.
Now, also, what about Coco and Encanto? Because if you take them out of the equation, then there goes the loss of the notion with Frontierland and Big Thunder.
Right. Yeah. Right. And the tricky thing about that is like, well, do you do that, and do you do the New Orleans segment down south, and now we're talking three lands potentially, or that kind of whole thing? It's like, I just don't know what their ambition level is for any of this, and that's why. And maybe Coco has a future in Epcot. We don't know. So that's why it's like, I think it slides it down further.
Dre, I completely agree with you. The villains thing, they focus group that thing at D23 Expo. That the likelihood of that is high. So, George, you asked about like the numbers. I would give the villains like an 8. Honestly, like an 8. Now, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but eventually it'll get made, and I think it's about an 8. I would agree with Dre as well. I think Zootopia is definitely on the table for all the reasons he mentioned. Number one, they're already building one in Shanghai.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper to build 2 of everything, in bulk kind of. Mm-hmm. That's why they built 2 Galaxy's Edges. It saves money in the long run. Mm-hmm. So I think Zootopia in Animal Kingdom is a shoo-in as well. I think those 2 are going to happen. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated, though.
Yeah.
Because Disney is very much into this whole like inclusive thing, right? It's a thing they're really focusing on. So it's funny because I'm torn, because I'm like, well, the Coco and Encanto and the Moana stuff is sort of least likely, but then again, those are the virtue signaling lands for them, right? Those are the lands that can kind of go, look at us, right? So it's like, I don't really know where they fit in. The villains thing and the Zootopia seem to make the most sense. The other ones, aside from the signaling, I don't really know where they fit in. Mm-hmm. Those kind of throw me for a little bit of a loop. So I'm going to say the Spanish area, the Coco and Encanto, if we're going to rate it like numerically, I'm giving it like a 6. Moana,
go with like a 4 or 5 myself, but we're relatively close. Yeah.
4 or 5 with the Spanish area.
Yeah.
Mine was actually 6 for the Spanish area.
Okay.
I wanted to take one step a little bit closer, because I was thinking like 50-50. So I was at 5, but I thought I'd give it one more point over, just because, again, of just that pat on the back. It's like, okay, we're including everybody.
And OG made this point the other day, that we're already seeing, I believe, Maribel and the little boy from Coco, what's his name? Miguel. We're already seeing both of them in Frontierland and Disneyland. So that's kind of like an association they're making already.
Right.
It wouldn't take that much to broaden that out and make it a part of Walt Disney World's Frontierland, which I guess they've already come to that conclusion. So you're right, OG. I think like that's kind of in the works, even if we don't get it in this form.
Yeah.
Maybe we get it, in some other form. But go ahead, OG. Sorry.
Well, no, yeah, and absolutely, and that's probably the future of all the frontier lands, at least for Walt Disney World and Disneyland, is kind of going in a more Spanish direction. Because let's be honest, the whole cowboy thing isn't, right now, they're not really
little toxic Mexican either. It's a little, it's that frontier attitude. I don't think they're necessarily all thrilled about that. We're seeing that with Ranches of Zocalo and stuff like that.
Woody's going to get burned, no pun intended.
Yeah, well, hey, what movie did they make? A Woody movie or a Buzz Lightyear movie?
Right.
There you go. Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, OG. It's like it's a little bit of those things, but you can still go forward with concepts that feature both those IPs and not expand at all. You could possibly take other parts of Magic Kingdom's Frontierland or even Disneyland's Frontierland and kind of orientate them in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I actually wouldn't mind too much, to be honest with you. I mean, the Spanish stuff that they've incorporated and kind of sprinkled into Disneyland's Frontierland is actually really well done, and it's a very natural, organic feel to it. very Southwest still, right?
Mhm.
But it just takes a more Spanish approach, and I think it's pretty cool. I wouldn't mind that if they kind of implement it in kind of a subtle way. That would be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of
do
cool.
agree.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Coco, Encanto, and Moana, I'm all at a 6. Villains, I'm at like an 8.5, and Zootopia, I'm at like 9.5. Like
Yeah.
I'm like more for certain Zootopia even before the villains. Unfortunately, I would take the villains over anything, but I think Zootopia is pretty much in the bag on that one.
I think so, and you got to think. You got to put the operator's hat on. Which park needs it the most? It's got to be Animal Kingdom. I mean,
Right.
we need more attractions there. This one's already built. I do agree with you. I'm about like a 10 there. Villains, oh man, like a 7 myself personally, and probably everything else maybe a 4 and below. Honestly, I mean that's just kind of like where I'm at. So I wish, I hope, I pray that something happens that really pushes the momentum forward on these things. That really gets it started, and we can kind of see the outgrowth of this. But even as Josh Yamone and the other people on stage said, it's like we're talking about, discussing, probably, maybe, that kind of thing. And it's they don't want to commit themselves to anything, and I think that was done purposefully. I think the only thing that really gets them to jump in this direction. Epic Universe.
Well, and here's the thing. Well, yeah, competition I think does definitely motivate, but I do think the self motivation, the self competition also motivates, and we see a lot of that here at Disneyland Resort. Like we don't really have competition out here in Anaheim or in Southern California. The Universal Hollywood isn't a big competitive factor to Disney like Orlando is, right?
Yeah.
But that self competition, and what I mean by that is, why did they spend $1 billion on DCA? Why? Because the park was underperforming to Disney's own standards. So they poured $1 billion into it.
Sure.
Why did they necessarily do Indiana Jones Adventure? Well, at the time, the parks were kind of struggling, or, Disneyland was kind of struggling. It was kind of early on in that Michael Eisner era. So they were, so it's a self-competition to sort of, outdo oneself sometimes that also motivates. But in Florida, absolutely, the universal thing is the elephant in the room.
But that's also the heat they're getting now with Tiana's Bayou Adventure is because they committed to that back in 2020. They said like, boom, this is what it's going to be. And it's like, I think they moved a little bit too quickly before they had a good solid foundation. And I think that it can benefit Disney in a way, but it also can hurt them, with time management, cost cutting, because it's when you quickly make a decision of before you even know what you're doing, that could hurt you. But then when you take too much time to sit down and discuss it, that also can hurt you. It's like finding that equal balance.
The famous story, two famous stories actually. One was Islands of Adventure when that was coming up, and it was going to be opening in summer '99 and all that kind of stuff, and it was supposed to be this game-changing theme park destination, and I do think it has blossomed into that for sure, and I do think it was kind of that at the time. I mean, they really were ambitious, put a lot of effort into it, and it was supposed to, have this kind of gravitational shift for that Orlando market. Not only was Beastly Kingdom on the table, but a slew of e-tickets were drawn up by WDI at the time in preparation for when that actually debuted, and let's see what actually happens. And because of Universal Escape, that marketing concept didn't quite work out. The internet was still burgeoning at the time. It just didn't have the reception that people imagined, and all of those e-tickets and concepts, they went away. Because it was just, there's no need for them. We have saturated what we feel is our market and kind of our internal motivations. Now, when it's by contrast, when Islands of Adventure finally added with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter in 2010, the next year in September of 2011, what do they announce? An association with James Cameron to bring the world of Avatar to life at Walt Disney World and all these other places within the Disney Empire. And we started to see big momentum towards the Potter Swatter game, as it were, right? That's just kind of that's where the company's at right now. I think.
Yeah.
They're really not into adding these big additions unless they really have to.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, the attendance shows.
Yeah.
The amount
People
of
still
revenue
coming.
that's coming in, it shows with all these hard ticket events, with the Oogie Boogie Bash, with Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, the Candlelight Procession. Like, it's like everything. Disney's making bank, and it's like, well, if we don't have to spend the money, people are going to come anyway. But when like the new sheriff in town sort of comes knocking on the door, so to speak, and it's like, well, okay, now we gonna have to kind of pull some of that money out of those savings accounts.
Well, yeah, and right now the company's really kind of focusing on, from what I understand, buying back stock. Interest rates were just hiked again by the Fed. So I think Bricky was saying that in order to bankroll any of these projects, it would cost about 3 times what it did even 3 years ago. Right. Just in interest alone. I mean, that's kind of what we're, where the market is right now. You're talking about the market losing, I think it's like $7.6 trillion since a couple of years ago. I mean, it's right now it's kind of economic shaky ground. So it's like, why commit ourselves to anything during these times? Now, Epic Universe, that's 2025. There's, I think people can assume that economic conditions will, I think, change, and maybe then they're in the kind of mode of, okay, let's go ahead and do this. We not only have a reason to do it in order to compete with Epic Universe because of whatever those conditions might be, but also too, the market has changed, and supply chain issues have kind of abated, and all the stuff we're dealing with right now, that's in the rearview mirror. Maybe that happens, but as far as right now, I don't know. I'm unsure.
And this past expo could have went one of two ways. It could have either went that they were going to announce big, huge announcements that were guaranteed, that were literally coming out, had a set time, had a set date, construction's going to start immediately. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been that's going to lead up to 2024 expo. And I think this was, as we all had mentioned, this expo was the focus group that's going to lead into Expo 2024. 2024, yep. I think, is where we're going to actually get the finalization of rubber stamp. This is what we're doing.
You think so?
I think. I think 2024 that they're going to end up saying, oh, 2 years ago we had brought up this and we brought up that and we wanted to get your guys' opinion. It was like a vocal survey, sort of speak, and it's like, well, guess what, we're going to dive into it a little bit more. We're green lighting it, and here's an updated concept art of it, and here's going to be some of the attractions that are going to be involved in it, maybe some restaurants that are going to be involved. I think 2024's expo is going to flesh out a little bit more detail than what they have attempted just to get people's opinions.
One massive caveat, though, at least for Walt Disney World for the 2024 Expo,
mm-hmm.
is that 2025 is Disneyland's 70th, right?
Oh, that's
okay.
So they're going to be spending, I'm assuming, pretty big money on that already.
So 2024, 70th Disneyland, 2026, after Epic Universe opens, Walt Disney World.
Would be my guess.
That's what I was thinking, but OG, you make a great point.
Or they could actually do a combo, because if you actually think of what they did for Disneyland's 50th, they brought a bunch of stuff to Walt Disney World. Mm-hmm. They did the Cinderellabration at Magic Kingdom. They did the Lights, Motors, Action. They did Soarin', which that attraction is still there. So I wonder if they can kind of take maybe the milestone of Disneyland, maybe not necessarily have it built, but have the announcement to say, as part of the celebration. But I think for Disneyland 70th, to your point, OG, I think maybe by that time we can hear some starting up of that engine for Disneyland Forward.
Hope so.
Possibly.
I'm pretty sure. Vote. I think the votes that are actually going to take place in 2023 is what we determined, OG.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Pretty sure 2024 solid bet.
And then the Olympics are when again for Anaheim?
For the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
I think it's like
keep
2028, if I'm not mistaken.
2028. That's what it was.
Something
It was
like that.
2028. Yeah. Okay. So if they make that announcement in 2024, give or take 4 years, have some stuff done ready in the pipeline for Disneyland.
By 2028. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the Frozen Land comes in, right?
There you go.
That
There
is
you go.
possible.
And that might be why they waited and didn't say anything at D23.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. They have a method to their madness. There's times where we may not understand why, but I mean, the company is strived going on 100 years, and we just have to have a little faith, trust, and pixie dust that for the next 100 years, they can, hit another grand slam home run.
Yeah,
I agree.
We'll see. Like it is hard being a fan because we're obviously not in the room, right? We're not privy to a lot of information.
We would like to be.
I'd love to be. Invite us into the room, JFAC. We would love to be there,
And we can figure this out real nicely.
Real nicely, we could figure everything out, talk shop. But unfortunately, we're not in the room. And sometimes it's kind of hard to, from the outside looking in, to kind of make heads or tails. But
it's like you want to answer for them. It's like, yes, just say yes, just do it. It's like, come on.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's frustrating. When I heard that Frozen was on the list, I was like, it's like right there. We were gonna get something. Yeah, like you said, George, there's a method to the madness, and like you said, OG, there is information we're not privy to. There is, and again, Parks is just one division of a conglomerate that spans out the entire globe and has its fingers in just about every single industrial pie there is. It's like it's just one small part of the equation, and you have to balance your capital expenditures, your investment, so forth throughout all of its diverse product line.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to thank you fellas for joining me on this journey through Animal Kingdom, Magic Kingdom, seeing what's beyond that Big Thunder spire. And you just never know, are we going to see a little Mexican village from Coco? Are we going to see a magical chateau from Encanto? Are we going to see a Disney villain's lair? Or are we just going to see another simple pop-up shop? Who really knows? It's the sky's the limit. It's blue sky, folks. So, but I want to thank you fellas for joining me on, as Mr. VashSky puts it, a robust discussion with this Citrus Corner episode of Orange Grove 55. I'm going to start down below here with Mr. VashSky. Where can everyone find you on social media, sir?
Hey, best place to find me is going to be on Twitter, right down there at VashSky. You can go ahead and type in the Twitter, and it should pop up pretty good there. Or maybe somebody else is talking about me. Don't follow them. Follow the at VashSky account though. But no, you guys have been really great. It's been fantastic, been wonderful. And again, a lot of your replies and everything, and your conversations, sometimes they do make it into shows. And OG, and George, I think we have plans for a show stemming around some Twitter discussions that we've been having. So
a good one.
A good one.
Yes.
Good one.
A good one. A good one. Hopefully it all works out. But
stay tuned, folks. Because this one's going to be a doozy.
Absolutely. 100%. But if you like that, definitely subscribe to the show because, well, if you want to see me, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
But really nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
I do agree.
There you go. And of course, the man sitting beside me. Oh, there we go. Sitting beside me right there. Needs no introduction, but you know what? He's the man that made this channel, makes it all happen, gives VashSky and myself something to do week after week. And we thank you, brother, for including us in your channel, Mr. Orange Grove 55. And you could find him, well, on here, Orange Grove 55.
Right here.
It's been an honor serving with you all.
I like it. I like it. I like it. Optimus Prime. Great
Absolutely.
stuff.
And of course, I'm George. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Disney Family Man 23. You can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. And of course, you'll find me right here on Orange Grove 55 with what we're doing right now, Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info. And as Mr. VashSky had pointed out, we do love listening to your opinions, comments, thoughts. Comment down below on this video. We love to hear, what's your scale of 1 to 10 of everything that we talked about? Do you agree with us? Do you have different input? Maybe you would put something else there? Or, what type of attractions or features that you would add to the villains and Kanto, Moana? As I said, the sky's the limit. We want to hear from you, and who knows, it may end up in a future video. So, take that risk, folks. I did, and look at me. I'm part of Orange Grove 55. You made this.
Oh, man.
You made this PA boy's dream come true. And with that said, folks, you all have a wonderful night. And remember, stay sweet and fresh.
Thank you very much.